I want to talk to you about how can we bring out the best in our spouse. I want to talk to you about your marriage and some things that you and I can do to continue to grow this most important, this vital relationship that God brings us into. So if you have your Bibles or your iPhones or your iPads, and if you don't have any of those, turn your eyelids to the screen for our text. It comes out of Genesis chapter number 2. And this morning I'm going to be reading out of the English Standard Version because there's one little phrase I just love so much about the translation here in the English Standard Version. Genesis chapter 2, verse number 24. The Father says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother," and here it is, "and hold fast to his wife." In your sermon notes here on campus or online, you may want to circle that little phrase there, hold fast. Some translations use the word to cleave. It means to be very close together. He says to hold fast because the two shall become one flesh. I love this imaging that the ESV gives us to hold fast. It speaks of a real intentionality. It speaks of a determination. It speaks of strength. And I'm holding my spouse tightly, closely, near to me. That I am not just being loose in this relationship. I am not just being flippant. And it's not a relationship of convenience, but it has great intentionality and focus in my life that I might hold fast. And it is my prayer that today that we will all leave, those of us who are married, that we will leave with this desire created in us by the Spirit of the living God, that we would hold fast to that which God has brought to our life. This morning I want to begin by just sharing you 5 principles that you and I can practice that will help us to hold fast to that which God has given us in this relationship called marriage. Now, I want to say this right up front, even though I mentioned Trish and I will be celebrating 25 years of marriage. I don't want to, in some false piety, lift us up as though we have really got it all figured out. We don't. It's been a wonderful 25 years, but for anyone who's been married any length of time, you know that within that marriage, there are some difficult moments, there's some hardships, there's some disappointment, there's some heartfelt pain. There are some moments of confusion and aggravation that you just got to kind of work through. And so most of the things I'll be talking to you about this morning that we have learned ourselves directly, it's the mistakes that we have made, and maybe they will help you. The really good points I'll be sharing with you this morning, I found somebody else. And so we're all going to learn from them and grow. But here are 5 things I want to talk to you about, 5 practices that you can put into practice in your life that will strengthen this union of your marriage. And the first one is this: you got to make a covenant commitment to your marriage. You got to have a covenant commitment to your marriage, because this unique relationship is so special that the Apostle Paul even mentions in the New Testament that there is a mystery between Christ and the church and a husband and his wife. It is unlike any other relationship you and I will ever have on earth. It's more than a friendship. It's more than a partnership. It's more than just 2 people deciding to do life together. No, it is a covenant commitment. And we're going to circle back to this word covenant in a few moments and kind of dig down on that. But I want to talk to you really on this first one just about commitment. Because commitment is an interesting word, and it's interesting on how it rolls out. Because commitments are usually made in our life when things are going pretty well. Marriage commitment. We in love. All we hear are the songs of Kenny G falling off the portals of heaven in our background. And it's easy to make a commitment when everything is well and we really want to move forward. For instance, how many of you, every December, at the end of December, you make some type of commitment about, I'm going to lose weight? It's an easy commitment to do then. Why? Because for 2 months we've been grazing. We've been eating everything in sight. And it's like, I can't eat another bite. I'm committing myself to lose 20. I do that. I do that every year. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I say that at the last week of December. And I'm glad to report today, on the last day of February, I am now just 25 pounds away from my goal this year. See, a commitment is a determination that I'm going to follow through on what I've given myself to, even when it's no longer fun or easy or when the road is bumpy. You got to make a covenant commitment. Number 2 is this. You got to celebrate your differences. You got to celebrate the differences that you have in your marriage, because when God created your spouse, God created them differently than you are. Let's get away from this whole thing of, we're perfectly compatible because we're just alike. No, you're not. There are so many differences between you and your spouse. And if we're not careful, we will allow these differences to be points of irritation instead of places of celebration. And if you and I will commit ourselves to celebrating these differences and recognizing these differences are what really balances us out and helps us to become really all that God would have us to become. You're different than your spouse. See, one of you likes it hot and one of you likes it cold. One of you is a saver and another one is a spender. One of you, no doubt, is a dreamer and the other one is pragmatic. One of you loves to watch Like It or List It, and the other one likes to watch ESPN. You know what I'm talking about, men? Can I get an amen? Some of you all about Chip and Joanna, and some of us all about Chase Elliott and NASCAR. You know what I'm saying? We're different. And if we're not careful, what we'll do is we'll allow those differences to be points of irritation. And that point of irritation can become divisive in our marriage relationship. I had to learn this. Tricia is not like me, and that's a really good thing, because one thing our marriage doesn't need is another Tony in it. Listen, it can barely manage the Tony it has in it now at times. And I like being on the stage. I like being here in front of you. I love teaching the scriptures. You know what Tricia does not like? You know where she doesn't like to be? She doesn't like to be on the stage. Matter of fact, any time in 18 years that we've been here that she has been on stage, you would not believe how hard I had to negotiate to get her on the stage. And at times it really would irritate me. It's like, baby, you're the first lady of the house. You need to be up there with me, girl. She's like, Tony, that's just not me. And so I discovered that her talents and gifts are much different than mine. And she's much better back there talking to you and connecting with you and helping you get involved in the church. You know, your spouse is different than you because God made them different than you. And that's going to bring a balance to your family. So celebrate differences. Third one, you got to work on communication. You got to work on communication. Research tells us that currently husbands and wives only spend about 4 minutes of meaningful conversation in a day. 4 minutes. It's not that we don't talk, we do. Hey, what's for dinner? Hey, did you go by the bank? Did you get the dry? I'm talking about meaningful conversation. Like, how is your day going? What's going on? What's in your heart? What are your goals? What are your dreams? Only 4 minutes a day. We got to work on communication, because I just mentioned about how we are different, and there is one area that we are really different in. It is in the area of communication. Therefore, you have to really be intentional to work on the skill of communicating with your spouse. Listen, I'm a communicator. I work often on becoming a better public communicator, and I work better and harder at becoming a better communicator with my staff. But sometimes I forget that I've got to work on this means of communication, this mode of communication, because she is my spouse and I need to communicate, yet we're different. Some research suggests that women speak as many as 30,000 words a day and men speak about 15,000 words a day. And I can tell you, by the time I get home, I'm down to about 7 words. And apparently Tricia has a job where she doesn't talk all day because she's still got 30,000 words when I get to the house. So we got to learn how to communicate. One of the things Tricia and I do, we sit down and we call it eyeball to eyeball time, or knee to knee time, where we're looking at one another and we're sharing, we're talking about what's going on in our day, and we try to ask a little deeper questions. Try to figure out how we're doing, what's going on, what's exciting us, what's causing fear and uncertainty in our life. We set down our phones, we turn off the television so we're not distracted, so it's just focused communication. And it's a game changer for us. And let me tell you guys, the most romantic words you'll ever speak to your wife, ready? You may want to jot this down in the margin here. This is going to help you immensely. In those moments, if you'll learn this one little phrase, it'll change the narrative of the night. It's this. And what happened next? Tell me more. I'm telling you. And one of the things that we've also learned in our communication is this. We've learned to parrot like the bird. Like when we get done with a discussion that may have got a little heated or there may have been a little frustration in it, we've come back to ask this question, or we'll say this, okay, Tricia, this is what I heard you say, or this is what I heard that you need from me. This is something you need me to work on here. And I'll repeat what we've been talking about for the last 75 hours. I'm sorry, for the last 20. And I'll repeat. And you would be amazed, guys. You would be amazed at how often I get it wrong. I'll just be honest with you. I say, you were saying, she goes, no, that's not what I was talking about. I was actually trying to say this. Now listen, that can be frustrating in that moment. But it helps us work on our communication skills, because better to go ahead and deal with it till we get it resolved then than both of us leaving that conversation thinking the other person understood what we were saying when they didn't, only to bring us back to that place of frustration again. Listen, men, women, your spouse is different than you, especially in the area of communication. Listen, and it doesn't matter the context and even the words. Listen, we can be standing in the same place talking about the same thing, using the same words and meaning completely different things. When Tricia stands in the closet and she says, I have nothing to wear, it means I want a new outfit. When I stand in the closet and I say I have nothing to wear, it means all my clothes are dirty. Same exact location, same exact words, different outcome. So learn to communicate. Spend some time talking, sharing about what's going in your life. Is this helping you a little bit already? I hope it is. Here's number 3, guys. You ought to celebrate. Or number 4, this one you ought to celebrate with me, guys. You got to feed the fire of romance in your marriage. Oh, really? You're going to go all church mouse on me now, brothers? You got to feed the fire of romance in your marriage. You got to have a fire burning there. And if you're going to have a fire of romance, you got to add some logs on the fire occasionally. You got to strike a match. You got to be intentional about this. Trish and I, we do a lot of premarital counseling, and the 3 areas that we work with young couples on, making sure that they're focusing on these 3 areas, because we've learned if you can work through these 3 areas, your marriage is going to just be light years ahead of many others. And the first area is the issue of finance. The second one is communication. And the third one's intimacy. And when we get to intimacy, they're like going, oh, preacher, don't worry. We got this one. We're going to be good right there. And it's like, oh yeah, see you in 6 months. All right, we'll go ahead and say, because we have this idea that romance is just going to just happen, that intimacy is going to be easy, that it's just going to just fall in place, and you know, we're going to show up, and there's going to be flowers and roses, and there's going to be Kenny G bolting it behind us in the background, or Luther Vandross, or you know, Carrie Underwood, or Justin Bieber for the youngest ones here, or I don't know what that looks like for you, but you think it's just going to work, and the reality is it doesn't just always happen. And if you're not intentional about building a fire of romance in your home, I don't care how hot the fire is today, that fire will dim. And you got to be intentional. Throw some logs on it. Guys, let me just help you out of here a little bit. I mean, if it's Thursday and you and your spouse and your wife, you've been busy all week, and you work outside the home and she works outside the home, and they're dealing with the kids and getting them to rec league and all their events at school, and there's laundry to be done and meals to be fixed, and you haven't hardly spoken to your wife all week long other than, hey, what's for dinner? Hey, have you seen my keys? Or where's my other shoe? Or all that stuff. And then Thursday night you roll over in bed and go, hey, baby, you awake? I'm telling you, the next sound you hear is going to be... Come on, guys. We need to do a little better than that. Can I get an amen from the ladies? All right, now, ladies, I'm going to be honest with y'all, too. I'm going to come with some of you ladies, the only time you ever say, honey, quick, turn out the lights and lock the door, is when you see your husband's parents showing up in the driveway unexpected. I'm sorry, that's funny. I don't care who you are. I've been holding that one for a long time. I'm going to laugh on that one just a minute. How many of you guys, I'm telling you guys right now are going, oh, that is so true, but I cannot say a word, Pastor. I'm with you, but I'm not going to agree out loud with you right now. You got to be intentional about this. Get excited about this. Because I want you to know there is a deep pain when romance and intimacy is not clicking. And because we've allowed the culture to define for us what romance and intimacy and sexuality should look like, we have this skewed view of this. And unfortunately, maybe because it has been so corrupted in the culture that the church has not spoken enough about this. And I simply want you to know that the God who created you and brought you into your marriage is excited about intimacy being a passionate part of that marriage, and He will meet you there. And if the flame has died down, He will help you fan the flame, and He can turn that story around. Can I get an amen? Here's the fifth thing. And this seems a little like no kidding, but I really want to strike on this for a moment. You got to put and you got to keep Jesus at the center of this marriage. You got to keep Jesus centered there. You say, well, Tony, of course, I mean, we would expect you to say that. You're a preacher. You're a follower of Christ. But I'm saying you got to keep Him there because He's the one that created this thing. Marriage was not designed by man to solve a man's problem. The first thing that God said that was not good in the garden was that man was by himself. And He created for him a helpmate, Eve. And He brings them together, and we read that text, and the two shall become one, and they should hold fast to one another. But it was not an image where God says, okay, I've put you guys together, I'll see you later. One of the most endearing pictures we have in the Bible is that Adam and Eve, that first couple, walked with the Lord in the cool of the day together, that the Lord was a part of that covenant relationship, and that covenant relationship honored the presence of God in it. We got to keep Christ the center. We got to lean in often. We got to humble ourselves. See, too often we think, well, I can do life my own way. I can do marriage my own way. I want you to hear these words from Psalms chapter 127, verse 1. Unless the Lord builds this house, unless we do it the way the Lord calls us to, unless we're focused in on Him, it says those that labor to build this house, they do it in vain. It's not going to work. Well, I'll make it work. I'll do it my way. I'm telling you, the best way to figure out how to get it to work is to go to the one who designed it and understand how it works. You can go buy yourself the nicest car or truck and say, you know what, I'm gonna drive this thing and I'm going to treat it the way I want to. I don't care what the owner's manual says. I don't want to put unleaded gas in this truck. I'm going to put water in it. And you can. The problem is that truck is going to be destroyed. And when you and I try to do marriage in and of ourselves alone, it is going to be a rough and a bumpy ride. But when we lean into Jesus Christ and we invite Him consistently to be a part of this covenant relationship that we have, it changes everything. Oh, it doesn't mean that there will not be difficult days or hardships or disappointments or setbacks or arguments or fights or all those things. It simply means that He is, if I might use this, the glue that continues to hold us together and strengthen us in our life. I want to rotate back and circle back around to that first truth I mentioned to you, that you got to make a covenant relationship. Because the God who designed this is the God who will define it. And the way that God defines marriage is a word that is a weighty word throughout the Scriptures. But it's a word that oftentimes we don't fully understand. Or we try to understand it through the lens of our own culture. And that word is the word covenant. That this is a covenant relationship that we have with our spouse. Now, covenant is found throughout the Bible. And it's the way that God deals with us, His people. A covenant is this. Let me just give you these very quickly. A covenant is a formal and a solemn binding agreement based on a loving relationship. A covenant involves promises. It involves families and bloodlines. A covenant is spiritually charged. And there's a spiritual reality at the heart of a covenant. And covenants are not easily broken. Matter of fact, in the Bible, when you look at the Hebrew word for covenant, it means to cut. So when people made a covenant, they would cut themselves. There would be a cutting of the covenant. Now, we've seen this in different cultures. Maybe you've seen this in different people groups where they will make a covenant and they will take a knife and they will cut into their hands, their palms, and then they'll take those two palms and they will put them together and they'll wrap a cloth around them. It's a picture of we're doing more than just agreeing. We are becoming blood covenant in relationship. It's a picture of they're mingling their bloods. Now we know we can't mingle our bloodline, but it is what is being emphasized here, that this is a unique and this is a special relationship that is bound by blood. That the two of us cease being two and we become one. Covenant is seen throughout the Bible. Let me give you a couple pictures of it. The first one that we probably can think about is the one that God made with Noah. Remember that. After the flood and after Noah and the ark lands on dry ground, they see what? They see a rainbow. And that rainbow is a sign of what? The covenant that God made. And what was that covenant? That covenant was, I will never again flood the earth. And every time we see a rainbow, it should trigger us to remember that our God is a God who makes promises, and He is in relationship with us, and He is not going to break those promises. And it should trigger us to be reminded that our God is a covenant-keeping God. It shouldn't just remind us of Noah and the ark. It should remind us that God is a covenant-making and a covenant-keeping God. How about this one with Abraham? God made a covenant with Abraham, and that covenant, He says, Abraham, if you'll follow me, if you'll agree with me and be in covenant with me, then your descendants will outnumber the stars in the sky and the sands that are in the desert. Did anyone happen to see some of NASA's footage of the Mars Perseverance rover in the pictures they took of the sky, the heavens? If you haven't seen it, I saw it last week when we were in Tampa. It was breathtaking because there's very little atmosphere around Mars and there's no lights that would detract. They were able to take the cameras and shoot them into the heavens, and there is just this canopy of stars, and you could see them band to the Milky Way, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And as I saw that, I thought, that reminds me that our God is a covenant-keeping God, that He keeps His promises from generation to generation. He does not walk away because covenant matters to God. What about David? God made a covenant with David. It's called the Davidic promise, the Davidic covenant. And what was that? God said, David, upon your throne, my Messiah will come. And you remember when you start reading the New Testament and goes through all that genealogy? It says, and so begot so-and-so, and then David begot so-and-so, and that. You know why that's there? To help us remember that our God is a covenant-making God who holds to His promises. And then, of course, in the New Testament, on the night that Jesus was betrayed, He took the bread and He took the cup, and what did He say? This is the blood of the new, say it, covenant. That I'm joining into relationship with you. And this is a special relationship. Let me give you some qualities of covenant that are different than what we are most familiar with, and that is contractual relationships. We live in a very litigious society. You can't hardly do anything anymore without having to sign some type of contract. And we can make the mistake of thinking that a contract and a covenant are one and the same, and they are different. You are not in a contractual relationship with your spouse. You are in a covenant relationship with your spouse that you are to make a commitment to. And let me share with you some of these principles of the difference between a covenant and a contract. First of all, a covenant is based on mutual commitment. A covenant is based on mutual commitment. where both parties are entering into this saying, I am fully and totally committed to this, that I have closed all the back doors. There are no escape clauses. There are no, well, if this doesn't happen, then this is going to trigger. None of that. It's an all-in mutual commitment by both parties. Not for a week or a year or a decade, but for life. A contract, though, is based on mutual distrust. A covenant is based on mutual commitment. A contract is built on mutual distrust. That's why the language is always about protecting me or protecting you. It's got all these different defenses in there. The second thing I want you to notice about a covenant is that a covenant surrenders rights and assumes responsibilities. A covenant relationship means that as I enter into that, I am going to surrender my rights and I'm going to assume responsibility for your life. A contractual relationship means that I am protecting my rights and I am wanting to shirk any responsibility of your life. A contract is about protecting my rights, and you're responsible for protecting your rights, and I'm not going to be responsible for you, and I'm not asking you to be responsible for me. This past couple of weeks, my wife Trish and I, we refinanced our home. And it was really crazy and great. And sidebar here, for some of you who are maybe a little older, may remember, I guess, the Carter years in the administration. I remember hearing my parents talk about this. At one point, they were thankful to be able to do an assumable loan on their mortgage for 25 years at 15% interest, and they thought they got a deal. I just did a 30-year at under 3%. And as I'm sitting there with that attorney in the closing office, I'm sitting there and I realize all this is a contractual relationship. And I asked the attorney, I said, hey, listen, I just want to make sure I understand this right. You are not here to protect my interest, right? He says, you got that right. I am here to protect the interest of the bank. I represent them. I said, wonderful. And if I understand the closing documents correctly, I am paying you so that you can protect them. He says, once again, you're right, Reverend Vismore. I said, that's a brilliant idea. Someone was really smart on the other side of this contract to figure that out. But what did that attorney do? He just kept handing me these papers. Hey, all right, this paper you need to sign here because if you don't do this, this will happen. Hey, you agree to do this, and if you don't do this, and you got to do this, and if you don't. What was he doing? He's saying, you are in a relationship where now you got to protect your own interest, and they got to protect their interest, and I'm going to try to mitigate that. That is not the love, marriage relationship that God calls us into. Because a covenant relationship, we surrender our rights, and we assume the responsibility for the one we're with. Number 3 is this. The covenant has the best interest of the other in mind. A contract is about personal convenience in mind. Or you could say it like this. A contract says, what's in it for me? A covenant says, what's in it for you? How does this relationship best benefit you? Several years ago, a couple, probably in their mid-40s, late 30s, early 40s, they had been attending the church for a little while and got to know them. And they came up to me one Sunday and said, hey, listen, we're getting married and we would like you to do our ceremony. And I said, well, that's great. We do have to do premarital counseling here. We want to get to know you, figure out where you are in this journey. And we were in that, and we were in probably the second or third week, and we were talking about the financial portion of our marriage and being partners in this and being on the same page. And you got to make sure it's not her money or your money, it's God's money that you're both responsible for. And at that point, he says, oh, okay, I need to just stop you there. I can save us some time. We're actually not going to do any of that. Actually, this week, we're signing our prenup. And I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, we got a prenuptial because we both, I've built a lot of assets in my life. And I've worked really hard in my business, and I have a lot, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to prenup this thing, and so this will be mine, this will be hers, and if something happens, and I said, okay, that information just changed the outcome of my involvement in your ceremony. I said, because I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to be the officiant here, because what you need is you need an attorney, because you're looking for a contractual relationship with some backdoor clauses that you have available to you. And I'm a minister of the gospel, and I promote covenant. And if that's what it's going to be, then I'm not going to be a part of it. And he really got riled up. He even said something along the lines, well, man, you made a commitment. I'll bring a charge against you. I sort of looking at the bride-to-be going, really? Really? This is who you want to marry? This guy's already wanted. That's fine. Do what you need to do, but you're crazy to get involved with this relationship because it's not a covenant. Listen, I know that may be strong, and I know that may be difficult to hear, and you may be even offended in that, but I'm telling you, as your pastor, you do not want me to waver. You don't want me to waffle on what God has established for His covenant relationship called marriage. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to be hard, but I'm trying to be a man of truth and say, this is where we stand in this. This is a covenant relationship that God calls two people in, that they may become one. This is not about convenience. It's not about ease. It's about for the glory of God and Christ being exalted in this covenant relationship. And we need to make sure our relationship is built on covenant and not on contract. Can I get an amen? All right, let me land this thing here. You say, but that still, even covenant sounds a little heavy. Let me explain what covenant really is motivated by. Covenant is motivated by love, not by contract, not even by agreement. It is motivated by love. It moves forward in love. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says it like this. Paul says that love is patient and love is kind. Love is not jealous, it's not boastful, it's not proud, it's not rude. That this covenant love that he's talking about does not demand its own way. It's not irritable, it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice in injustice, but it rejoices in whenever the truth wins out. It says love, this covenant love, never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful. And this type of covenant love, unlike contractual agreement, it will endure all things and it will win. And this is the love that God calls us to in our homes, in our marriages. Covenant love. You say, well, Tony, I don't always feel love. And I want to give you this last little point here. And this is so important for all of us to continually be reminded of. Love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. Love is not a feeling. It is a choice. And when we allow our feelings to dictate our actions and our commitments, then I'm telling you, our life will vacillate terribly. But when we say, you know what, I'm going to do what the Scripture says there in Colossians chapter 3, verse 14, that above all, I'm going to put on love. I'm going to clothe myself in love. I'm choosing to love today. I know my spouse and I, we've been sideways and angry, and we haven't even hardly talked to one another all weekend long. But today, I'm going to choose to love. And love is patient, and love is kind. Love is not going to hold account of the wrong. It's going to be merciful and kind. We put on love. And notice what it says. And he says, this love binds together everything in perfect harmony. All the other virtues that we would want to be developed in our life, we put on love. Listen, this morning you had to get up and decide to put on your clothes. Some of you made several different decisions, ladies, on which clothes you would wear today. Some of you guys may have needed to make a different decision on what you... But you had to make a decision. I'm putting on this shirt. I'm choosing this blouse. And every day, you and I, we have to decide, I'm going to choose love. And in doing so, I'm motivated now by love into this covenant relationship by which I am covenantally committed, by which I am going to work on my communication skills, where I'm going to fan the flames of romance, where I'm going to celebrate the differences, and where Jesus Christ is going to be the center of my life and home. And in doing so, I'm going to bring out the very best in my spouse, because the covenant relationship always thinks of the other of more important than themselves. And here's the final thing. Say, Tony, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can love like that. I don't know if I can do that. And here's the last point I want you to see as they're coming to the music. Is that, next slide, please. Is that the capacity to love comes from receiving love. The Bible says we love each other because Christ first loved us. In other words, you cannot export to your spouse what you have not yet received for yourself, and that is this covenant love of God.